Joining me now are MSNBC contributor Malcolm Nance, Karine Jean-Pierre of MoveOn.org, Yamiche Alcindor of PBS News Hour, Jason Johnson of TheRoot.com, and Jill Wine-Banks, former Assistant Special Watergate Prosecutor. Thank you all for being here. I want to go to you first, Yamiche. John McCain planned these last several days of his memorial to the letter, and very specifically with a lot of messages in mind. He had to know that the message he was sending by asking that gentleman, the former president of the United States, Barack Obama, to speak for him at his funeral, was sending a resounding and very sharp message to the current president of the United States, who he pointedly did not invite. Your thoughts?
Well, the message today was really American values over party politics. This funeral, I think, was as much about John McCain as it was about the future of America and what we want to be as a country. When I think about the speakers, you start with Meghan McCain, who talked about the fact that America has always been great, that her father told her that nothing will break you. Then you go to Joe Lieberman, who said that John McCain nurtured American values and that was one of the things that stuck with him. Then you go to Barack Obama, who said the best way to honor John McCain is to fight for your country. This was really a day where people were thinking about, okay, we're Democrats, we're Republicans, but we're really Americans. And what that means is we have to respect each other. We have to be decent. We have to think about what the best thing is for generations to come. And I think over and over again, you heard that, and that was by design. John McCain, planning every single detail of this funeral, knew that everybody was going to be watching this, that this was going to be overshadowing anything that happened today. And of course, President Trump, he's playing golf, he's tweeting about NAFTA, tweeting about Russia. No one's listening to that right now because everyone's really enthralled with the idea that after John McCain dies, we're not sure who's going to fill that void.
Yeah, we're quite not paying any attention to him, and it has to be quite painful for the current president. He is not getting any attention this morning. Karine Jean-Pierre, I had Steve Schmidt on earlier, who fought on the other side of that 2008 campaign from you and me, who were working on the Obama campaign. Watching President Obama speak, I think a lot of people in my timeline, a lot of people on my text messages were feeling incredibly wistful. It feels like almost an anachronism to see a man stand up there who has this incredible sense of the grandeur of America, the scope of what America means, who can speak to it in such an eloquent fashion, and who did it on behalf of the man he vanquished for the presidency. John McCain was a war hero, a genuine, bona fide hero of the precise type that Americans used to elect as president, the Eisenhower archetype. He was kept from the president by two men, George W. Bush and Barack Obama, and invited both of them to speak at his funeral. Your thoughts watching, Barack Obama, who I think made everyone wistful for that era of a president who could speak in that manner about us, us as a country, and the passing of a kind of senator we don't have anymore in John McCain.
Yeah, Joy, there were really no empty gestures at all in the last couple of days, and certainly today by John McCain, as you mentioned. He really planned every inch of his funeral once he learned that, when he was diagnosed with brain cancer. And John McCain got exactly what he wanted, a total and complete rejection of Trump and Trumpism that was broadcast live on national television for all to see. What we saw today was former presidents, and as you mentioned, Obama and George W. Bush speaking today, Obama speaking so eloquently and so poignantly. And you saw senator leadership, all of Washington, D.C. essentially coming together to reject Donald Trump. I think he would find it hard-pressed, someone would find it hard-pressed to see a more public, a more ceremonial rebuke of a sitting president. I have never seen anything like this. It was incredibly powerful, what we saw today.
Done by your fellow Navy man, Malcolm Nance. Just a list of pallbearers: Joe Biden, former Vice President Vladimir Karamurza, very pointedly included political reporting, McCain's choice of Russian dissident as pallbearer was a final dig at Putin and Trump. And McCain, of course, was an avowed enemy of Putinism to the very end. Russ Feingold, Phil Gramm, it's all stars, but of a particular type and era in American politics. But that Vladimir Karamurza inclusion, what did you make of that as a pallbearer?
Well, in the homily that was made to John McCain by several of the speakers, he rejected all forms of totalitarianism, while at the same time fighting against the communist country, which imprisoned him and tortured him horribly. And it should be noted that the government of Vietnam came out with their own condolences this week, well ahead of Donald Trump's, in order to express their regret for the man that normalized relations between the United States and Vietnam, including one of his former torturers. It was very poignant, but by inviting an anti-Putin dissident to be one of his pallbearers, one of the last people who will carry his body on earth, he's making it clear that his belief that America is a shining beacon, is a nation which stands above all others in the celebration of democracy and liberty. And he's making it very clear that he is aware of the dark time that we're in. That phrase was used at least twice today. Yeah. And that he believes that America itself is going through a catharsis. And now, knowing his death was coming, perhaps this could be a moment where this presidential level funeral could bring us together and try to start the healing. But I don't know if it'll work. It breaks my heart to even think about it.
Yeah, I mean, by the way, the president of Ukraine, Petro Poroshenko, in attendance, as well as the mayor of Kiev, the former prime minister of Ukraine. A lot of pointed invitations were included in this funeral. Jason Johnson, the other thing that, is notable about the McCains is that John McCain actually did live the future United States in a very personal way. Not only their daughter, John and Cindy McCain's daughter, the youngest daughter who they adopted from Bangladesh, but even his daughter-in-law. He has an African-American daughter-in-law that his son Jack married, who's also a military woman herself. The fact that he lived this sort of code of valor and honor in honoring his father and grandfather's legacy in the Navy. He lived a kind of American story that was both anachronistic in a lot of ways, but also sort of very vitally plugged into what America is becoming.
Yeah, when I look at this funeral, and it's very emotional, and I have to say this up front. I know lots of people have feelings about John McCain, the policy person. I want to speak about John McCain, the individual, the father, right? This is a man who was a father. This is a man who, when I've spoken to people who've had to work with him in the Senate, he asks you about your kids. He was a kind, friendly, and loving person. And he is sort of this bridge from the past to today. I mean, if you look at it, his old pictures, he looked like an Abercrombie and Fitch model when he was in the military. I mean, he was kind of a living Captain Kirk. The day that he was brought back to the United States, it was 1973, March 14th, a couple years before I was born, that's actually my birthday. I always thought it was interesting. I mean, he is sort of built into the fabric of America, and I think that's important. I think just like we saw some of the greatest generation pass away, as we see Vietnam veterans pass away, as we see people who dedicated their lives to service pass away, it's important for us to remember that they represent something good too. Not everything in the past was bad. Not everything in the past has to be rejected and repudiated. And while he made mistakes throughout his life, some of which he would never change his mind about, he did represent a kind of dedication to service, not to get rich, not to be famous, not to make money, but a dedication to service that everyone can admire, even if they disagree with how he performed some of that service. And that's what I got in looking at this. And I believe his family, who at one point was attacked during the 2000 primary by George Bush, and the daughter that he has, I think they're representative of a man who could, even in his personal life, change as America changed around him.
No, absolutely. And speaking of George W. Bush, and that campaign was also incredibly, people forget how nasty that 2000 primary was, including those accusations of the black daughter, which were not made by the Bush campaign, but were made by sort of allied sort of nasties on that side. But let you listen to George W. Bush, the 43rd president, earlier eulogizing John McCain, his former rival.
He was courageous, with a courage that frightened his captors and inspired his countrymen. He was honest, no matter whom it offended. Presidents were not spared. At various points throughout his long career, John confronted policies and practices that he believed were unworthy of his country. To the face of those in authority, John McCain would insist, we are better than this. America is better than this. John, as he was the first to tell you, was not a perfect man, but he dedicated his life to national ideals that are as perfect as men and women have yet conceived.
You know, Yamiche, it is interesting that, those who are of us who are on the other side of George W. Bush on everything, including the war in Iraq, even his presence sort of represented something that seems bygone. The ability to still look back with some sort of wistfulness to a leader and to see that person as president, right? So that they embody the office despite the fact you have bitter differences with them. That also seems to have passed away with this era that John McCain represented.
Well, really, it's an era of decency, an era of looking at the president, even if you disagree with him, as someone who can speak eloquently and who can lay out what the president and what the American people think is just shared values. This idea that even if you disagree with someone, even if they're a Democrat and you're a Republican, even if you're a man and they're a woman, there are things that you can just share and actually have in common, and you don't have to fight tooth and nail. And when you have disagreements and you talk about people's flaws, they don't have to be kind of cheap shots and nicknames and yelling at people. They could be, this is what I disagreed about. This is maybe a vote that I didn't appreciate, but overall, this is a good person. What we're seeing now, I think, is essentially a president that is doing that.
Yeah, and Jill Wine-Banks, we have been at this stage in American history many times before. Incredible divisiveness. A president, at times leading that divisiveness or causing it. The Nixon era was obviously one of them. Your thoughts as you watched this service for John McCain, this front row full of power, incredible power, men who embodied the presidencies, a woman, and also Al Gore, former vice president, who aspired to the presidency, and the absence of one leader in that on that front row, the current president of the United States. Your thoughts?
Well, to me, John McCain represents character and values and civil discourse in a bipartisan world that we have seemingly lost, and that I hope that this reminder and this very touching parade of wonderful speakers eulogizing him will remind us we could have back again. John McCain, I'm in Telluride now for the premiere of a movie about Watergate, and John McCain is one of the people in the movie, and his humor and his decency are certainly portrayed there as they were in all the comments that were made about him today. And I really just hope that the process that Watergate allowed to go forward can go forward in a bipartisan, civil way that would honor John McCain's memory.
And as we finish today, can we just show this moment when the song "Danny Boy" was played? Because it is important to remember, that this is a loss for the nation. It's a loss of an era of politics. It's so painful for all of us. But this is really a loss for a family, for Cindy McCain, for Meghan McCain, who has been so emotionally open in the loss of her dad, of the children, Jack McCain, and the other, large family that encompassed 2 marriages, I believe 5 children. This is their loss, and it's deeply personal for the McCain family. And to watch Cindy McCain sort of put her head on her son's shoulder when that song was played, it was heartbreaking. And so I think that we have to remember that as sad as we all are and as wistful for all of these bygone eras, this really is a loss for the McCain family first and foremost. Malcolm Nance, Karine Jean-Pierre, Yamiche Alcindor, Jason Johnson, Jill Wine-Banks, thank you all very much for sticking around with us today. Thank you. And that is